Hi, 6th and 7th graders. For this week's lesson, I want you to do some experimenting, some practicing with different watercolor techniques. If you have not finished your outline grid drawing, your contoured grid drawing, make sure you do finish this first. I just want to say awesome job to my in-person students. I was gone last week and yeah, they all look great, so awesome. I'm very proud of you all. Get this done. If you don't have this done today, it's homework, virtual students, so get this done for next week, definitely. I also want you to get this done as well. This shouldn't be very hard because it's super fun. We're going to be practicing different types of watercolor techniques. So my virtual students, along with your big watercolor paper, I sent home little strips of that paper that I cut off with the cutting board. I want you to use, there's a purpose, there's a reason why I sent those home, as to practice your watercolor techniques before you do it on your final. So I have these long strips, and you should have at least one of the long ones, but if you have kind of the shorter, wider ones, you can use those too. All of those strips are just for you to practice the techniques that I'm showing you today, and then any additional techniques you might want to change some things up, and I'll talk more about that. And yeah, so hopefully you have those. If you don't, using your water or your art book paper will work just fine. Just make sure you rip it out, and don't paint while it's in your art book, please. You should also have your watercolor tray, just the basics, and then in your watercolor tray there came a small brush. This will work just fine. It'll be actually really nice inside each of your squares for your drawing. But my virtual students, if you have other brushes that you want to check with me first, feel free to ask. This is a larger, I wouldn't do anything larger than this type of brush. It's a round watercolor brush. Most watercolor brushes are made with animal fur. It's nice and soft, and it works really well with the water and the paint. This is a nice flat a flat brush, which would be really nice along the edges of your squares. So something kind of like this. I love using these types of brushes. But if you don't have anything, this is going to work just fine. So you'll need your watercolor paints and a cup of water. I use mason jars, but but if you have like a plastic, talk to mom or dad at home too, and see what would they prefer you use for this. Okay, so the first technique that I want you to practice, and feel free to watch this video and then pause after I do one technique so you can just be painting along with me. I'm going to demonstrate, I think, 6 different techniques that I want you to do. There are additional techniques that you might want to try, and I have those pages posted on this week's lesson page. So here are the 7 basic techniques that I'm kind of working off of, and there's more of a description in there. There's also these wacky watercolor techniques, so I'll talk more about these at the end of class. But yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of these basic ones first. So first one that's actually not on the basic water technique. This is one that I'm wanting you to try, since we talked a lot about this element of art in our last project, value. So making a dark shade and then making it light, just like that value scale we made halfway through our still life drawing. So let me zoom this in so you get a better look. When you use watercolor paints, making sure that you dip in the water. My water is kind of dirty, but it's not super dirty. But if yours gets super dirty because you're using black and brown and purple and blue, then you can always empty it out and clean it. Okay, so dipping in the water, I'm trying to show you, but you guys all can see, blah, blah, blah. Dipping in the water and then dipping and adding plenty of paint or water to your paint. Not a lot, but just enough to activate it. And then when you do this value, starting on the edge, ooh, that's dark, and then working your way across and not even going back into the water, just going until it's nice and light. Now, I ran out of water, almost out of paint. I'm just going to dip into the water and try to continue this. You can see my mark is already made though. Try to continue this until it gets lighter and lighter. I'm just doing an up and down motion. It's going to get lighter and lighter and lighter. So something like that. Okay, so darkest all the way to the lightest. And I might go back and try to fix this part right in the middle, kind of blend that a little bit together. Okay, I want you to practice this. You might have to practice it more than once, so you have those extra sheets. Practice. If you use up all of those watercolor sheets, my virtual students, use your art book paper. Use printer paper. Try other things. Anything thicker would work, but yeah, that art book paper would work just fine if you end up using up all your watercolor paper. All right, so that's the first technique I want to see. Next one is just a wash technique, and your goal for this one is just to make a very even square that is all the same shade. Okay. So cleaning your brush if you're going to try a different color. I'm sorry, I'm zoomed out so much, or zoomed in so much. I'll try to. And then picking a color, doesn't really matter. And then your goal, and make a little space in between your practices, your techniques, so that you don't, blend your colors together. So my goal is just to make a nice even shade of blue. So I'm just moving it around, trying not to see so much of the paint strokes, the brush strokes. Trying to smooth out the puddles. Okay. Alright, it's a little dark up here. Okay. Alright, so making a nice, even wash color, one shade. So that's one technique. Second technique. The next one is called the dry brush technique, and you need a dry brush. So having a paper towel or a rag or tissue or something on hand. Dry your brush off really nicely. You will want a little paint or a little water in one of your paints, so maybe before you dry it off, just add a little water, and then you're going to dip it in, and then just kind of, dry brush. You're going to get kind of this streaky, kind of a good, this is a good, if you're thinking of grass, for mine, this would be a good one to do in all the background for my dog and the frisbee. Kind of a grassy texture. And this one's cool too. If you look at this example right here, you could paint like this right here, a wash, and then let it dry, wait till it's nice and dry, and then add this texture on top of here. Okay, so the possibilities are really endless. I want you to practice these basic ones, but then once you have these techniques down, you can experiment, you can try different things, you can, layer them on top. Yeah, possibilities are endless. So dry brush technique. The next technique is one of my favorites. It's called wet on wet. Some of you have tried this with me before. I think if you're in 6th grade, I don't know if I've done this with 7th graders. When you're in, I'm not sure if I've done this with you guys, but a few years ago I did this project called Imaginos. So you made these little characters out of these watercolor blobs, and we practiced the wet and wet technique. So what you do is you just, I don't think any of you have done this with me, but what you do is you add just water, no paint, just a little puddle of water, and then you dip into, oh, yellow's so light, I'll pick it, dip into a color, and it's kind of like a nice little, it's almost like a firework of color that just kind of blends. Let's see how that moves around. And it's fun because you can try all different colors, see what works well together. And all I'm doing is just doing little dots, not really blending anything. Try a little brown and see what happens. Ooh, kind of funky. Yeah, need more yellow. Make sure you're cleaning your brush before you dip into a new palette, color. Okay, so this is wet on wet, so the colors kind of do the blending on their own. And you can even play with this a little bit, like because it's still wet, I could even make like a little kind of canal. It's kind of the fun part, is you can kind of stretch it out and change that shape with the water. So that's kind of a fun idea you can try within one of your squares. Okay. Next is the blot technique, kind of like a sponge technique. If you just add some paint and then, you know, paper towel, tissue, if you have sponges at home, you know, just kind of blotting with your finger and making kind of a cool texture. You could spread it around too. You could try different colors. Ooh, my colors got mixed. Try different colors. That's kind of a fun one. There is one with plastic, and I'll talk more about that. That's kind of in the wacky watercolor technique category. And then the last technique I want you to try is the crayon resist, and some of you might have done this already. White crayons are fun, but you could try any of the colored crayons. I did it, let's see, I can show you. Here's the white, and then I just did a little blue. You know, I know some classroom teachers have done this with students in the past. So just drawing something and then trying, you know, color out and going right over. The important part of it is to make sure, and I don't think I did it right away, is push down really hard with your crayon. So I'm kind of glad I didn't do this so I can show you, but I didn't push down really hard, so I did towards the second half of this little wavy line, but if you don't push down hard enough with your crayon, then the wax resist doesn't happen. And again, you could try this with other colors. And then you know, it could be contrasting colors, might be kind of a nice effect. You know. I don't know. So many things to try, but these are the techniques that I want you to practice today. I've been practicing them a lot, but there are other things to try if you want to continue this. I did not go over the salt. If you sprinkle salt into a wet wash of watercolor paint and then you let it dry, it kind of creates this cloudy, cool effect. So especially if you use coarser salt, not really fine salt, so if you have that at home. Masking tape, so doing kind of a stencil design and then painting around it and then pulling the masking tape off. Just be careful, you know, not letting the masking tape sit too long. I know you'd have to wait for it to excuse me, dry as well, but as long as the tape doesn't rip your paper. And then if you're getting into the wacky ones, With my students who are in person, I'll probably have some plastic wrap. We might try this glue one. And then this rice one, I might bring some of that. This oil one would be cool. I might try this too, but these are all requiring that your work your work dries. You're waiting till it dries overnight for a period of time, so we'll see. There's rubbing alcohol, so talk to mom or dad at home. There's a stencil type of design. This one's kind of wild. Epsom salts, so I don't know if you have that at home. I do sometimes, but I haven't tried it yet because I don't have it here yet, but kind of makes a really neat crystal-y effect. Plastic wrap, or even just using a plastic bag, just ripping it up, kind of makes that scrunchy, cool line effect right here. Glue, so if you draw with white school glue and then pour small amounts of salt over the glue outline, and then you touch loaded brush, so a brush with a bunch of paint on it, onto the glue and salt, and then you let it dry overnight. It kind of makes this funky effect. And then rice, you just let it sit overnight. And then oil, using a tray underneath your paper, separately drop watercolor and oil onto the paper using pipettes. Yeah, and then you let it dry overnight. So things you can try. Again, for this week's class, we're just going to go over the basics, and then I might take some of these things out when we start on our final and get going on that and try different things. So for my virtual students, you have a little more independence. Talk to parents if you want to try some of these wacky ones. So yeah, all right. Have fun, friends. Let me know if you have any questions at all.